Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women Atheists UNLOAD, a show produced by Skeptic Haven, your favorite YouTube channel. I'm sure of that. Tonight, we're going to talk about a very recent topic I learned about. It's called queerbaiting, and we're going to explain what it is, what it isn't, and how it affects LGBTQ people. For that, I will be joined by a very interesting and nice crew that I'm really happy to have tonight. And so let's jump into it.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Women Atheists Unload. Joining me tonight as a co-host will be Bumblebee. Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, doing all right.
We
You are
also
well.
have, yeah, we also have Redangel Sophia. Hi, nice to meet you. And Stephanie, who we've had several times already here. How are you guys doing?
Very well.
Just fine.
Cool. So first, yeah, you were going to say something?
I was like, so what do you guys know about queer baiting? Because I'm just kind of learning. I'm learning the term, but I'm familiar with the concept.
This ain't it.
Basically, many times, let's say you're a big TV studio or a movie studio, and you want to make money by getting LGBT people to watch your show, but you don't want to face backlash from bigoted people. And being a corporation, you obviously are too much of an invertebrate to stand up to them because corporations have no backbones. So what do? You give hints that there's going to be LGBT representation in your show. You may even give hints and subtle cues in your show that some of the characters might be queer, but at no point give any undeniably explicit on-screen confirmation that those characters actually are queer. And that way you get to have it both ways, because LGBT people who are starved for representation will come and see your show, but right-wing bigots won't be alienated. And it's a very harmful practice. And here's the thing is, there are a few shows these days that have stopped doing that for LGBT people, for lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, and actually started giving actual representation to lesbian, gay, and bisexual characters, but are still creating where transgender characters are concerned. So...
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw a trans character. The last time was in Sense8, which is an amazing show, by the way.
You don't ever see a trans character in media that's not their entire point of being in the media.
Yeah, most of the time they're prostitutes.
Yeah, trans prostitutes, just like all of that. No.
Not queer baiting. A little bit anyway. Dreamer in Supergirl. Not queer baiting. That's honest to God trans superhero person being portrayed there.
Yeah. And
However, queer baiting, same show. The same sex attraction between what Lionel Luthor and another protagonist in the show. That's a little bit of queer baiting, or at least some people would see it that way. Basically, it's a way for mainstream content creators, big companies like Disney, to get more eyeballs on the screen, more asses in the seats, and not go so far as to alienate the mainstream culture. And the mainstream culture being people who would otherwise take great umbrage as, oh my God, there are queer people on the screen. That's terrible. And very often it's up to just sneaking up to the level of actually portraying queer people as real people, but not going all the way. Which is why it can be offensive, which is why it can be
harmful,
problematic for people who, as Redangel said, are just dying to see good representation of queer people and queer lives being portrayed on the screen.
Actually, I don't know if we can pull it up or not, but I shared the piece of media that I found. Yeah, this is something that I always thought was kind of funny. This is the character's Plastic Man from the DC universe, right? And he's kind of a goofy character, like plays around a lot, but he's got a bit of a queer edge to him. A lot of people ask if he's gay or not, and then they have him transform. Like what he's doing here is trying to transform into, like, present himself as Harley Quinn, the Joker's girlfriend. But you see he's still wearing his goggles and stuff. But the thing that you want to note about this is that Plastic Man can reconfigure his whole body, and there's if you don't notice that he chooses to retain certain characteristics is pretty obvious here. And to me, yeah, this is like, but this is the only piece of artwork like this for that character, and I'm kind of interested in seeing if that ever develops anywhere. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share about this.
Yeah, you guys alluded to representativity, and I wanted to insist on it because very often it's not. It's something that's just brushed off, and I want to talk about it and explain why it's necessary. Can any of you jump in?
Well, for one thing, a lot of people get their idea of what is normal ways of living from TV. The normal way of interacting with people. TV probably plays a bigger part in shaping people's idea of what is normalcy than it should. And that's actually why it's especially important to get representation in children's media, where it's actually the hardest to get it in, because that's shaping the minds of those people who will be the adults of the future. And basically what kind of representation we have in children's media will affect how the adults of tomorrow treat transgender people.
Yeah, it's setting a kind of a standard that, hey, we're just, whether it's trans people or just queer people that are gay or bi or whatever, that allowing them to just exist within whatever fictional narrative that you're orchestrating is great. That, however, there's a line to say that if that's their only reason to exist is to be representation, then you can keep them. I would rather have a character than just don't know what you'd call it, an archetype. Not that there's anything wrong with archetype.
Well, you mentioned earlier Dreamer in Supergirl, and I like the way the fact that she's trans was integrated into her powers and her origin story. I thought that was interesting because it, as you said, Bree, it wasn't just let's put a trans character here just so that we have one. It was integrated into the story, and I found that interesting.
Yes, it's integrated in the story, and the actress who plays that character is trans. She's from my home state. As a matter of fact, she was the poster child for well, I forget she's from a fairly rural area in Maine, and when she was going to high school, she wanted to use the proper facilities, and she was at the center of that whole bathroom controversy back when she was a teenager. I have a lot of respect for Natalie Maines. Lots and lots of respect for her.
So, what other reasons would we put forward in order to explain why representativity is important? Because Sophia mentioned the idea of
yes.
Yeah, you saying something?
I had to change my microphone. Do you hear me now?
Yep.
Sounds kind of staticky, but yeah, I hear you.
Well, let me switch again. Sorry about that. This is embarrassing.
No, you're fine.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've had my share of tech issues. So it's people don't realize that queer baiting is not like a new thing either. People have been doing it as long as there's been fictional characters, right?
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's become more of a thing over the course of the. I mean, I've been doing some research on the topic. It's
in
become
the Bible,
more and,
Stephanie. You think David?
Okay, in that case.
You think David and Jonathan were just friends?
Yeah, but I don't think the story. I'm not sure the story was designed to put eyeballs on the screens and asses in the seats in quite the same way.
Let's not forget the way that the Bible was written, in that basically one person wrote something at one time, someone else later might edit it, and at some point somebody decided that everybody should think of it as divinely inspired. But so basically, maybe originally the first person who first wrote it as a queer story, and then later when people got more, I don't know that this is. I don't have any scholarly confirmation of this. This is just me spitballing here, one possibility, but I just want to make that clear so that nobody thinks I'm like. But maybe one person wrote it as an actual queer story, and that maybe somebody later at a more puritanical time may have edited out anything that would make it explicitly queer.
Well, there was a little. The Old Testament's definitely more queer than the New Testament, right?
Well, no. There's the disciple that Jesus loved. There's that.
What about Gilgamesh?
Are we?
But there's everything in the Old Testament. There's child abuse. There's rape. There's
But I'm
girls,
just saying that
girls raping their father. There's everything in the Old Testament.
We don't know what's missing from Gilgamesh, but him and Enkidu were like really, really close, and that's like the first written record. So the very first written story is Queerbaiting, confirmed right here on the show tonight.
Can we not fucking talk about the Bible
Gilgamesh
for one fucking day? Not talk about the goddamn Bible.
There's something I'd like to mention. There's something I need to mention though about the Bible Belt, and that the Bible Belt is a region of the United States that is especially pious, and it's becoming increasingly dangerous for transgender people to live there. Never was a great place for transgender people to live, but now it's really getting dangerous. And there's somebody named Alfred who is transgender and trying to get out of the South. And you may not have help, but if you do have money to spare, he needs your help. I've given the producer the link to his GoFundMe so that if you don't have the spare money, I'm sure we all understand, but if you do have the spare money, go to Alfred's GoFundMe and help him get the funds to get out of the South. You could be saving a life if you do so, because it's dangerous down there for transgender people.
Yeah, as of today, there are over 400 legislations in the United States that target directly the LGBTQ community, and that's a lot. You have 50 states. That's on average 80 per state. That's huge. And it's getting worse. Every week we hear news about a new legislation in the U.S. Most of the time, in the Bible Belt, but not only some states in the north of the U.S. And the entire country is becoming like a target for our community.
Yeah, I think me and Stephanie could both make the whole rest of the stream about this topic, and U.S. legislation and House bills has been passed. We are both activists that actively are out here on the front lines of this stuff, especially the medical. Well, for me, it's the medical stuff, and for her, it's the sports stuff is where she mostly.
Well, it's everything.
It's everything.
It really is everything, and we could go on and on and on about that, but. I think this topic is really quite fascinating because it's got, I think that particularly in context, let's stay away from biblical times, in the context of the last 20 or 30 years, in some respects, queerbaiting is a sign of progress because major media organizations are seeing that there's a market, all right? So there are gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans people out there that are hungry for representation and therefore hinting at queerness in a positive light in major productions is seen as being something attractive that is going to again is going to help the box office. But everybody's tiptoeing around it because as we see, we can talk about the legislation all over the place. That legislation is driven as a pushback. Who does DeSantis go after? Disney. And Disney's a major studio that several of their characters have been, several of their productions have been accused of queerbaiting, right? It's like characters that are almost queer but not quite. Just that kind of thing. So in a sense, we've gone from the Midnight Cowboy, the down and out stories of, the horrible stories of the tragedy of gay lifestyles that I grew up with, that many of us have seen. It's just like if anybody hasn't seen the Netflix film Disclosure, please go watch it. Because the history of queer people, particularly trans people, in cinema, going from the early 1900s to the present day, hasn't been a pretty one. Far more frequently than not, the pity and shame and pain of trans people, gay people, etc., has been a major feature. So in a sense, queer baiting is a step in the right direction as far as major motion pictures are concerned. But at the same time, it's sort of a, for queer people hungry for seeing representation and not quite getting it. Also, at the same time, there's the flip side of that, wherein I came across one thing. Get this. There's a story in Vice magazine that came out, I think, this year sometime. Story starts out, "Hi, I'm bi. Congrats for forcing an 18-year-old to out himself," tweeted Heartstopper actor Kit Connor on Monday, coming back to the app after deactivating his account due to a storm of scrutiny from his fans and the media around his sexuality. Connor played the role of Nick Nelson in Heartstopper, a young schoolboy sorting through his feelings for his friend Charlie and ultimately discovering that he himself is bisexual. So, what could be called queer baiting actually forced this guy to out himself. Because
people need to realize the difference between a real life person and a fictional character. Queer baiting is done with, and also I've heard people make the reverse mistake, like when I mentioned how there's no reference in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power to Perfuma being trans. Somebody said, like, why shouldn't she have the right to be stealth? It's like, I fully support her right to be stealth to other characters on the show, but if she's also stealth to the audience, that's not representation. And if she's stealth to the
so that's a weird dichotomy right there too. It's like, so she can what they say, they pass, they can clock her and whatnot, the characters within universe, but you want to make it clear to the people outside universe that the character is trans. I don't know how you would even go about that unless you do it through social interactions, and then people are going to complain that you're shoving it in their face, right? So how would you even approach that without getting backlash either way?
Well,
it's a hard question, I know, right?
You have to, but the thing is, you have to, it could be there's a number of ways, but I think though that one would at some point have to face, in order to stop queer baiting, you're going to have to be willing to face backlash from bigots. That there's just no way around it. But thing is, if you are willing to do it, any writer worth their salt, I think, can find. I once wrote a story that used to be hosted on a WordPress site of mine until a certain malfunction caused that story to go down, where I had a character who wasn't stealth but closeted, except to an alien cat. But
so let's just have it. I mean, if it's just a story about a person and they're queer, and that's, like about a person that's queer, and they're not trying to just say, hey, we need to make a show about someone queer. Let's get a show. If it's just a story that's written, from that perspective, and not because it's from that perspective, that's completely different. I guess that's what they mean by queer baiting, when it's done just to draw in that demographic, or when it's implied and never confirmed, just to draw in that demographic and say, hey, this character might be, part of this demographic. They might be of this persuasion, but we won't say.
Yeah. The problem is sometimes it's hard to tell if it's implied or not. Mm-hmm. And also there's we need to go back a little bit in the past and remember that for about 30-40 years, anything that was deemed perverse and anything queer was deemed perverse was forbidden in movies. And so if you wanted to portray a character that was actually gay, for example, you had to use what they called queer coding, meaning they were using some codes to say it without saying it. And so this lasted after this, I think it was until 68, where it was forbidden. But there's this example that comes back quite often is Xena, the warrior princess. There was a relationship between her and another character, and the
Gabrielle.
I think I don't remember the name of the character, but
Gabrielle.
yeah, there was a lot of queer coding, and the show was praised for that. And today, if someone watches the show today, they might believe that it's queerbaiting, but in fact, it was queer coding. So it's quite hard to tell the difference.
Is there a difference between that
Sometimes.
and Adam West and Batman with Batman and Robin? Because Adam West has been on the record saying they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what they were doing with those characters and how they were presenting them. It was a joke.
Oh yeah, it was camp as hell. I mean, the original the TV series was camp as hell.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
it's
the
really
old
amazing.
movie.
Yeah. I mean, come on, it's a pow, bam, blah blah blah, and all of that stuff.
Well, I'm talking about the kind of the queerness between the two characters.
Yeah, and the implied
yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah, there was that.
So was that queer baiting or was that queer coding?
I would say it was more coding than baiting. I don't think that. Well, you know, this is the original. I was a kid when that series was on TV live. You know, at the time, and it was just sort of. And at that time, anything gay was. No. So you had to sneak the shit in, and they snuck the shit in. You know, it's like how much of Cole Porter's musicals had a bit of a gay subtext.
So, like when you watched that as a kid, did you pick up on the
Oh yeah,
relationship between Robin?
Yeah.
Okay, because I mean I did when I didn't. I was obviously I'm not old enough to remember when it was live, but it was. Something that was on reruns on Nickelodeon at night when I was a kid, and that was the Kids Network, you know. So we'd watch it at night after the cartoons ended.
That explains it.
Yeah, and I always picked up on it. I was like, okay, these are they're gay superheroes, which is fine. It was never, and the cool thing about it with those characters is it was never like in your face about it too. It wasn't like, oh, we're trying to be gay with these characters, like they just happen to be subtly gay, right? But it was done for comedy, of course, which is the same thing that people argue against today. All this like legislation against trans people, for instance. There's so many of these movies and representations from that era where they were queer coding people that would not pass to be in production in most states.
It's sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge sort of thing, really. And because it goes along with the impulse to have anything gay as a subject of humor, right? It's like the film "Some Like It Hot." It's a wonderful comedy directed by Billy Wilder, who is quite queer. But it's Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, and it's a great film. It's a wonderful film, but it's Joey Ross at the end of the film. It's like, are any of you familiar with that film? It's basically Lemmon and I forget who the other guy was. Oh, Tony Curtis. Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis were being chased by the mob. And in order to get away from the mob, they join a troupe of performers, female performers, Marilyn Monroe there, and they basically go into drag, and they start doing all this stuff, and the film goes on, and there's the mob's chasing them, and Marilyn Monroe teaches them how to walk and all this other stuff, and it's really kind of fun. Well, Joey Ross plays this old millionaire guy who falls in love with Lemon, right? and at the end of the film, the last lines of the film is like he proposes marriage to Lemon, and Lemon looks at him and says, "I have to tell you something. I'm a man." The last line of the film is, "Well, nobody's perfect." It's a good film. It really is. It's a good film. But it was, I don't know. It's that was like the subtext of the whole thing was a matter of comedy, and everybody got a big laugh out of it. The film won awards. It was very, very well acted. It was really terrific. It was one of Marilyn Monroe's greatest roles, I think.
Sounds like woke propaganda, Stephanie.
But and this is like in the 60s. Some like it hot. Look it up. It's a good film. Watch it.
That reminds me of an episode of Slayers where in order to get on the ship, for some reason, the male character has to dress as a woman, and there's this big tough warrior guy who gets sweet on him and starts hitting on him because he thinks that he's a woman. And at the end of the episode, he reveals that he's a guy, and you're expecting that he's going to be like, "Bleh." But instead, all of a sudden, he's like, that big warrior is like, "I don't care what you are. I want to be with you."
Oh, that's so sweet.
Thanks to Jessica Taylor in the chat, 1959. So, there you are. There's that's that film. I mean, queer, gay stuff, it's always been this sort of subtext of stuff in American media.
So,
but unlike sort of making fun of it, some of the more recent queerbaiting stuff is directed at having more positive, a more positive approach, which pisses off the right wing, because now we can't laugh at the fucking queers any longer. Now we have to actually empathize with them, and we can't have that.
That's a big complaint that you hear a lot. It's like from why can't we laugh about it anymore? And it's like, well, why can't you laugh about it anymore? That's more of a question for you than us, because I was the one that was in a closet for a long, long time because of the way that the culture around me treated drag queens, which is the only thing I knew about that could relate to being trans, and that kept me in the closet for so long, and I still have a stigma about drag queens to this day because of it. That's the cultural damage that kind of shit does. Sorry about the language, Wes.
But one thing I also want to mention is that sometimes, even if a show moves past queerbaiting for lesbian, gay, and bisexual characters, that show will still queerbait with regards to transgender characters. And there's a few shows specifically that come to mind that fit that profile. And probably the most infamous in that regard is the recent Netflix series She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which is a reimagined version of the 1980s series She-Ra, Princess of Power, which it was in turn a spin-off of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And anyways, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the Netflix series, it has lesbian, gay, and bisexual representation. And some of it is very explicit. Some of it, not all of it, but some of it is explicit. But let's see, what do they have with regards to transgender representation? supposedly the character of Perfuma was designed to be a transgender character, and they made sure that we know about it. But there's no reference on the show to her being transgender. She is played by a cisgender actress. Her voice, that is played by a cisgender actress. And then they said, like, oh, but we did give for one episode a one episode character who is explicitly transgender. And they said, like, oh, because we have Jewel Star, who is one of the Star siblings, who's in one episode, who is a trans man, and the voice actor is also a trans man. So I went and I watched that one episode that Jewel Star was in, which is supposedly that one show, one episode of explicit representation. I saw no explicit mention in that episode of Jewel Star being trans. Nothing explicitly mentioned that would inherently imply that he is trans. And supposedly, basically, the only thing they have that they count as like canonical proof that the guy is trans is the fact that he's played by a transgender actor, and that just does not seem right, because that would imply that transgender actors can only play transgender characters, which is a premise that is kind of problematic in its own right.
And vice versa, right? I mean, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Oh, we've had plenty of transgender characters played by cisgender actresses, like in Ugly Betty, or the main character in Trans America, both played by cisgender actresses.
Yeah. Before we move too far into the show, we're about the half an hour mark, or just past the half an hour mark, and I want to give a quick shout out to our patrons, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right. So I want to give a big thanks to the patrons. We got Tara S. We got Ryan. We got Deneen Murphy. We got Dan D. We got Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza. That's our host tonight. Also, Sunny Shell. That's your host on Thursday nights. Aaron Coalson and Phil Calderone. I hope I didn't say your name wrong, Phil. If I did, I'm sorry. And yeah. Anyway, sorry to derail everything. I just want to give some love to the people who give some love to us and keep the lights on here at Skeptic Haven. All right, continue on, ladies.
Yeah, Sophia, what you were describing sounded more like bad representation rather than queerbaiting.
The thing is, there was no actual. They said that there was representation when really there was none. I'm saying is there was no representation because unless you assume that a transgender actor can only play transgender characters, there's really nothing by which to say that character is trans at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to presume they are is kind of transphobic in and of itself, because it would imply that if you're a trans actor, that means your character is default trans unless otherwise noted, which should not be the way it is. Since trans are such a small demographic of the population, it should be assumed that the character they're playing is cis.
Then what do we make of Lumpy Space Princess from Adventure Time?
So I think of that like the same way that, remember when people flipped out a couple months back when they changed the bear that represented the libraries in the UK, the mascot, to the alien. It was non-binary. People flipped out. I think when it comes to aliens and stuff from other worlds, shut the fuck up. That's my position on it. It's like they're aliens. They don't have to conform to our standards. They don't have to have male and female. They could have dozens of genders. They can only have one. They can reproduce asexual. They can all be clones. It doesn't freaking matter. They're aliens. Lumpy Space Princess. Yeah, but go on.
But
It's
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, a cisgender female character played by a cisgender male voice actor.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the obviously crossover in theater has been a thing since the days of Shakespeare, when there were no females
Women
playing
can't be on
female
stage.
roles. You know,
That's
so
disgusting.
it's not that.
Stephanie. How-
That's not. That's just, you know. That's you wouldn't find an actress at the Globe back in, you know, performing. Lady Macbeth wasn't. You know, I mean.
Yeah.
So these are all cultural norms that change over time. I think that our current day is a day when people are profoundly uncomfortable with cultural norms that have changed, and they are profoundly interested in pushing back. Unfortunately, that has serious consequences for the people who are affected by outmoded ways of thinking about sex and gender that we thought were outmoded, but apparently the car salesman and you know, contractors that sit in state legislatures feel otherwise, and so they feel empowered to make medical decisions for people that they're not qualified to make those medical decisions for, be they people who can get pregnant or transgender people or you know, the whole controversy about conversion therapy. It's like, oh no, we got to have cis het white Christian America, and we're going to legislate that. You know, this is a problem. And to the extent that queerbaiting happens, that's the mainstream culture wanting to, again, eyeballs on screens, asses in seats, and all of that stuff. They're trying to make a nod toward the way the overall culture has evolved, where it's not unusual. You want to see, you know, there's a large enough, primarily gay, lesbian demographic that want to see positive role models portrayed on screen, and you know, and therefore get lured in by these situations that are almost but not quite gay. But you see what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying. That this is what we're getting back is pushback to any positive portrayal of non-cis het positiveness.
Yeah. I have a question for you about old media, real quick, since you were talking about, just real quick. Was there pushback against like Gilligan and Skipper too? I mean, what kind of stuff we got going on here? We've always dragged them kicking and screaming to be more progressive, but it seems like some of these things were beloved even to the conservative demographic at the time that they were released. Is that not true?
Was
the queer coding stuff, was it acceptable in general culture?
I think it. I think it was, to the extent that it's not taken seriously. It's like, you know, well, it's. I think there's some resentment among. To be honest, I think that the number of people that are really fucking irate about half this shit is really small. I mean, most people just go and live their lives, and just who cares? You know, it's fun. It's just fun. You know, it's just fun stuff. But there's this tiny minority of people that we, you know, in the atheist community, we run into them online the entire time. It's horrible. You know, it's unbiblical, and you're all going to hell. That's a tiny minority of the people. They're just loud, and they're idiots, and most people realize they're idiots. But they can't be arsed. The vast majority of people can't be arsed to go and do anything about those idiots that are trying to, you know, turn the clock back to the 19th century.
Well, we need to stop electing geriatric people into office first, and that might help. If we stopped electing the previous generation or 2 generations back, really, make our decisions based on the cultural relevance of their time.
I'm just going to point out to all you kids out there, Matt fucking Walsh is in his 20s.
Is he really? I've never heard
Yeah.
Walsh.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not sure there are tons of folk my age and older who are idiots and haven't grown up and haven't adapted, haven't moved with the times. But I'll tell you something, when I came out 25 years ago, my biggest allies were people like 15, 20 years older than me, conservative white men who said, you're good. I don't understand it. I don't understand anything you're going through. But as far as I'm concerned, you're good. And so it's not generational. It really isn't generational to my view, especially when I see who are the most visible homophobes, transphobes on YouTube.
Okay,
on Twitter. These aren't geriatric people that are making the pushback.
But who is watching them though is the question. It's not who they're putting in front of the camera, it's who's watching from the other end. I don't think that it's the same demographic that's putting it out that's picking it up.
I'm going to push back on that. I mean, it's like look at Jordan Peterson's following. It's like the whole thing about incel stuff. These are young people who are pissed off that they can't get any. And they're being preyed upon by the guy who's in jail in Romania, who's in his 30s, right?
But if you
late
listen
20s,
to like
early
what
30s.
If you listen to what like the Daily Wire hosts, with the way that they talk, those messages are not to Zoomers. They're not to millennials. Our generations see through that. We don't fall for it. We have whole channels dedicated to dunking on them being so dumb to think that they could trick us. The people that they trick are a generation that aren't as savvy and expect the news to be the truth still, which is not how the internet works.
I think it's more than just generational. It's the intersection between generations and pre-established very conservative mindset. But the thing is, the current culture war is funded mostly by old people, but it's fought by younger people, like all wars basically.
Well, that's because the old people have the money,
Yeah.
So
Well,
they can pour the money into it. But
and they're the ones.
Not
producing shows.
everybody who voted for Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene is over the age of 50.
No, of course.
I mean,
Right,
I'm just saying. I want you guys to realize I'm towards the end of my life, but I want you guys to realize we thought we'd won, us hippies. We thought we'd won that culture war. We thought we had it dicked. We thought we'd ended the war in Vietnam. We thought we would see legalization of marijuana in our lifetimes, and we have. That's great. But we thought we'd won these battles. We thought we'd put civil rights to bed. We thought we'd put gay liberation up, up in the forefront. The people that were at Stonewall that are still around. We thought we'd won these battles. And what we didn't realize was within our generation, there were people who were fighting back. The Young Americans for Freedom. All of those people within our generation were the people who were fighting back. And we hadn't won. The people of my generation and younger, and younger, were the people that elected Ronald fucking Reagan. And so what I'm urging you to do is pay attention to the people around you. Pay attention to Matt Walsh. Pay attention to Andrew Tate. Pay attention to these people, because they are people that are influencing people regardless of what you say. You may not know these people, but pay attention to how people of your generation are influencing others within your generations. Because if you don't keep your eye on the ball, if you don't fight harder, you'll see the same thing happen.
I think
That,
what
I'm off my
what's-
soapbox now.
Yeah,
I totally
think
agree with
what,
you.
What? Yeah, I'm finishing my point. What's important here is to remember that maybe the only mistake your generation, Stephanie, made is that believing that once you got some rights for a group of people, then it's done. You've got the rights, but there are always people who will try in the long term to take them away again, and maybe that's the message we need to pass on, is to say that yes, civil rights is a constant battle. Every time you gain something, you have to
saying.
keep fighting to keep it, because it will go away at some point, because people will fight back against it.
Well, once you cross the line, once we cross the line to get, some gay rights, for instance, gay marriage, some people are like, okay, we're done. We're not fighting for anything else. I don't want trans people gross. No, we're not doing that. There were people that left the movement there, that were like, yeah, okay, gay people are where we're drawing the line. Nobody else is valid. None of these other groups are valid. No trans people, no non-binary people, none of that. And they draw the line there. And then but that's always been the thing. That people are like, okay, women liberation, sure, but gay is gross. No, it's always been that way. It's always been dragging them culturally, kicking and screaming, and we lose people every step along the way. But we always keep moving progressively.
Yeah. And that's all I'm saying is eyes on the prize. Don't ever forget. Don't ever forget.
And we have to, and for that we in order to influence future generations, we need good representation in media, which is why queerbaiting hurts. And one other thing is, I'd like to mention, I think it was Brie you mentioned earlier about representation in the form of aliens.
Mm-hmm.
For that reason, I guess we should probably give an honorable mention to Lilo and Stitch. Yes, in the movie, one could have thought that maybe Pleakley was just dressing in female clothes in order to have a disguise to stay undercover. Although there's one scene in the movie indicating that it's more than that, even in the movie, and in the subsequent TV series, it's like very much clear that Pleakley is either transgender or non-binary or gender non-conforming. We're not sure which one. And also, furthermore, there is one episode where it's made clear that this gender non-conformism is just as big a deal in Pleakley's species as it would be among humans. There is an episode where Pleakley's family comes to Earth and they have to learn to be accepting of Pleakley. And I guess these days, of course, and then there's of course the character of Max Russo on Wizards of Waverly Place, who isn't born trans, but briefly, for like half a season, when a spell goes awry, he gets locked in a female body, and for that half season experiences all of the gender dysphoria associated with trans people until they find a way to reverse that spell. But then again, that's not real But then again, the problem there is doesn't really show that trans people exist in real life, because Max Russo is only that way as a result of a spell having gone wrong.
Sometimes that's what it feels like, though.
I figured when I was a small child that a spell did in fact go very, very wrong.
Yeah.
But I managed to, I found the magic words.
That they kind of play that out in what is it, Jumanji, the newer one, not the old classic one, but the one they made just a few years ago, where one of the characters is a young woman who gets stuck in the body of Jack Black and goes through a lot of gender dysphoria about the whole situation. She's the only one that got gender swapped. So
the problem is that though those things technically show someone trans on screen, but it doesn't really get through to the audience that such people exist in real life. And another thing about the wizards of Waverly Place is that their Uncle Kelbo, is a cross-dresser. Only since he has magical powers, he is able, when he cross-dresses, to do it a bit more convincingly, and he actually turns into Shakira.
Oh.
Is it Shakira or... Yeah. He turns into Shakira when he cross-dresses, because he uses magic to do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's still important to keep in mind that there is a very, very fine line between someone who is trying to give representation of queer people in a subtle way, and queerbaiting, because I think the intention matters a lot here. Between saying, yeah, this is queerbaiting and this is not. I think we have to take into account the intention of the authors. What do you think?
Well, we can't read their minds. That's the problem.
Yes, but yeah, we have a lot of communication now. We have Twitter and we have Facebook. Those people that they talk, and we can listen to what they say. And of course, they can say, "Yeah, we try to represent," and in fact, it's not the case. But I always have a hard time blaming someone for something if I'm not entirely sure that's what they wanted to do, because sometimes people can try to do something good and they do it wrong, and it has the opposite effect. So
I don't believe that we should. I don't believe that we should hold a starving artist writer to the same standard that we should hold a big studio, because a big studio can hire not just a single consultant, but a team of consultants, just in case one of them turns out to be a dud. Because there's, but where there's a case of Paramount Pictures years ago when they developed Chakotay for Voyager. There was a problem that the consultant they hired on Native American issues turned out to be a fraud or something, and why did they only did they only hire that one consultant? I'm guessing they only. You tell me, because maybe they should have hired more consultants than just
or checks
one.
the references.
That too.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, really. But, I mean, it's like some representation is better than nothing, but then again, you get into the situation where people are adamantly saying, well, demanding that the people portraying these characters have to come out in their own in their real lives. That's a bit of a problem there. I think that we can all get a little bit overwhelmed and overly concerned with, like people were saying. One of the examples that comes up an awful lot is the Sherlock Holmes series. You know, it's like where Watson and Sherlock that was in theory queerbaiting. But I don't really see it that way. I think I see it as storytelling. And it always gets a little bit difficult when you're. I think that the more obvious things are, if you promise that if you give the impression, if a studio gives the impression, a storyteller gives the impression that you're honestly going to try to portray queer characters in a generous and normal light, and then you never do. Then there's a question where you can go after them. For example, most I hate to mention her name, Joanne Rowling. Oh, Dumbledore is queer. Did you ever portray Dumbledore as queer? Did you ever, anywhere in your fucking oeuvre? No, you never did. You never will. You just said that to get, to appeal to the portion of your audience that, that is willing to go along with that trope. I mean, this is a woman who wrote about a story about a boy who lived under the stairs in a closet. And she turns out to be the biggest fucking,
bigot,
turf bigot on the fucking planet. She's using billions of dollars to shit all over trans people. And for that matter, gay people. It's just... So there are examples and there are examples in popular culture, and I think it's really, really difficult to get all together that worked up about it. I look back on 1959's Some Like It Hot.
One thing is you mentioned about how how queerbaiting on one hand is a sign of progress. Here's the thing is about progress. If you progress to point N, and then 50 years after that you're still in point N, then point N was progress when you first made it there. But if you stay there, it stops being progress, and you have to move on at some point to point N+1.
It's not progress. It's not progress if you don't get past the promoting of the alleging that you're going to start writing true characters, true. I'm looking for the word, but I can't find the word. Characters that seem true to life and they're gay. One thing is that if you promise that and don't deliver it, then then you're being dishonest with your writing, with your promises, with your marketing, and all that other crap. So yeah, we got to move beyond that and actually tell honest stories.
But also the almost queer but not quite queer characters. It's progress from the old state of not having any characters with any hint of queerness. The almost queer but not quite queer characters are a progress over that. But at some point we need to move on to actually having queer characters. And about the thing about what you say, if you don't know what is going on in the studio, you can't say anything. There is this thing of collective evidence, that you can't tell if maybe the person who showed this almost trans but not quite trans character wasn't really just doing plain old storytelling. But because sometimes a character can just be a plain old effeminate guy, and that's all there is to it. But if you see lots and lots of effeminate guys, but none of them ever transition, you start to wonder why. Now there's another character that I find actually very interesting, and that is the character of Wolf from Kipo in the Age of Wonder Beasts. Again, a show that does give explicit representation to gay characters and positive explicit representation. Kipo in the Age of Wonder Beasts. Some people have said that show is up there with Avatar. not the blue alien avatar. I mean, not the blue alien avatar. I mean the older Avatar franchise, the one from the. Some people say it's up there with that. But anyways, there's a character named Wolf. We never know what her original name was, or she's called she in the show, and no one ever challenges that. So that's why I said her name. But Wolf wears as a coat a wolf who once betrayed Wolf, and now is wearing Wolf as a coat. But Wolf's outfit is practically the colors of the transgender flag. And there's one episode of the show called, let me see what the name of the episode. One episode of the show called is Mulholland. In that one episode, you see Wolf's fantasy life, where Wolf and Kipo are in adult forms, and Kipo in Wolf's fantasy, Kipo is in a very buff but still female body. But if you look closely, Wolf in that fantasy sequence is in a male body. But you have to look closely to see it. And there are other cues that Wolf may actually be somewhat transmasculine, but there's never in the show any payoff on that. And in the last episode, they show the characters a year later, and it's pretty clear that they've basically were just stringing us along. And maybe everything else was a coincidence and just storytelling, but why does there's a color motif of Wolf's outfits so much resemble the colors of the transgender flag? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. On that note, since we passed the 1 hour mark, I would like to thank again the Patreons. Bree, do you want to read them, or do you want me to do it?
Let me go through that list again one more time for the people in back. That's Tara S., Ryan, Deneen Murphy, Dan D., Michael Wiseman, Kathy Cotton, Miss Cindy Plaza, Miss Sunny Shao, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Thank you so much for supporting Skeptic Haven, peeps.
And I would also like to give a big shout out to the producers, because I forgot to do it the last time, and it's very, very important to do it because they work a lot. So thank you guys in the back. It's very, very much appreciated, everything you do. I would like to thank also everyone who was in the chat to engage in discussions. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, share, comment during the show or after the show in the section, comment section. And I wish you all a very good weekend.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll go show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast.